Hi, I'm Melissa, and this is The Book Break. Today in our series for authors, we're talking to David Farland, who has been at this writing game a long time and has launched a lot of people. Let's go talk to him. All right, I am here with David Farland, and Dave, I'm so excited to talk to you about all the different things that you have to teach authors. So you've been an author a really long time. You have books to help teach authors. Tell me about this one that you have right here, because a lot of authors want to do book signings. They don't know how.
Well, this is called $1 Million Book Signings. I set the Guinness record for the world's largest book signing, single author, single book signing back in 1999. So I've had really great book signings, and I've also had really terrible book signings.
Yeah.
And so this is trying to help you get towards that really good end.
And so things have changed a lot since the 90s. Tell me, what would be a couple tips you would give authors today for doing book signings?
Okay, first of all, there's still a really great tool. Okay, for example, if you're a middle grade writer and you want to build a huge audience, you can go to schools and talk at schools and visit with, in fact, you and I worked together on that years ago. You can go talk to 1,000 or 2,000 kids at a time sometimes, and you do that 3 times a day, and what happens is you build a pocket in an area where you are a bestseller in that area, and if you do it in enough states around the country, you become a national bestseller. I taught that trick to one of my authors years ago, and he used it to become a #1 New York Times bestseller within 3 years. So learning how to do book signings and do them well is still a key skill.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things I've heard you talk about too is the importance of making the acquaintance and friendships with the bookstore employees.
Yes.
Do you still do drop-in signings?
Oh yeah. If you're an author and you want to, let's say you're a science fiction author and you want to become really well known, what you do is you go to the bookstore and you can take a coffee mug or a T-shirt or something like that to give to the sales manager who handles that department. And when people come up and say, "Do you know of any good books in the fantasy genre or something like that?" They'll remember your name and they'll say, "Oh yes, these books from this guy, he's really great," and they'll hand sell your books. I went to a bookstore where I did that one year, and I went back and saw the manager the next year, and he showed me a little notebook, and he said, 174, that's how many copies of your book I've sold this year. You know, and I thought, that's just absolutely great. You can't beat that. So doing what I just call, drive-by book signings, where you see a bookstore and you drop in and do that, it still works really well.
That's awesome. And now I also want to talk about you as an editor and as a teacher.
I've trained a number of writers and worked with hundreds of writers who are, almost 100 writers who are New York Times bestsellers right now. A number of people who are #1 New York Times bestsellers. And really what I do is I try to teach people not just how to write, but how to gauge an audience, how to write for a large audience, how to become a bestseller, understanding business techniques in the writing industry, and that type of thing. And so I have a number of different kinds of seminars that I do, and I do a lot of them nowadays online so that I can reach a global audience. And I'm also lately, I've been starting an online writing group where the Apex Writing Group is for people who are dedicated professionals who are already working in the industry to a certain degree, or people who are near breaking in, who are just finishing their first novels. And we have groups where we have accountability groups, and we have writing groups and study groups together, and all sorts of things.
So I want to touch on that for a minute. Help us see, because having a writing group, especially for somebody new and seasoned, let's tell them, why is that important?
Okay, so some of the very best writers in history have had incredible writing groups. For example, if you went back and you could join the Inklings and be studying with J.R.R. Tolkien and C.S. Lewis, you would obviously want to do it. Well, I get to thinking, we live in a world where distance and time don't really matter a whole lot. If you are living in New Zealand and you want to get into a really great writing group, where do you go? I've got one fellow that's in my group who is from New Zealand, lives on a sheep ranch.
Yeah.
Okay, another one's in Spain, other ones are in England or Australia. And so the point here is that we can create super writing groups now.
And what do
that
they
never
learn
could have
in a
existed.
writing group? Do you critique each other?
We critique each other, and we learn about the business of writing. We learn how to help each other so that we can boost each other's sales. We create what are called writers' rings, where we are helping share our audiences with other writers. We can learn, like in the accountability groups, we can set goals and say, I'm going to do this week and this week, so that I can get my book released and make it a bestseller for 3 months down the line. We learn techniques about how to pre-sell your books, how to sell them online, how to break into major publishing, but we're taking it beyond that, because in the Apex Writers Group, it's for writers who want to be working in the film industry too. So that when
I am so glad you brought that up.
Yeah.
Sorry for interrupting you, but this one makes me excited.
Yeah.
So we're here at a conference right now, and you are kind of known as one of the guys that helps people because you have participated in films.
Yeah.
And you have some tips and tricks for folks that if you're potentially given a contract, what are some of those little tips that we can give them that we got to make sure you look at? Well,
there's a lot of things in a contract.
Yeah.
Because there can be all sorts of gotchas in a contract.
Yeah.
But for example, in most contracts for major studios, there are 3 or 4 different ways that they can try to get control of your rights without ever paying you any money. And so you want to make sure that, for example, it may say in the contract that if the company that bought this contract goes bankrupt, then we can sell this contract as one of the assets of the company. And you just say, no, you can't do that.
Yeah.
Because that's a way that people con authors and try to get the rights to their stories. Or there may be a clause that says, if we make a movie and it doesn't sell, if we make a movie, then we get the right to remake the movie for the next 17 years. So they could go out with a home camera and shoot a crappy movie in 2 days and say that we made the movie and then hold on to your rights for 17 years.
Wow.
Okay, so there are a couple of little tricks like that you need to learn. So when you get a contract for a movie, you typically need to run it by either an IP lawyer or someone who's a Hollywood agent who understands where those gotchas are, and we go from there.
Yeah, that's great. And then with some of the other things, I'm going to go back just a step with the authors. You talk a lot about outlines, and I want you to give us some tips. And I know you have this great book, $1 Million Outlines, and give me some of the tips that you teach in this book.
The first thing is, there's a lot of books on outlining, and the difference between my book on outlining and theirs is that I was a greenlighting analyst in Hollywood, and so as a greenlighting analyst, I looked for what are the things that you can do to make this movie a big movie? And the way that you make it a big movie is that you can shoot to a wide audience, okay? In other words, we want to be able to write a screenplay that's going to attract the males, the females, old and young, all together.
Yeah.
We want to make sure that we hit the right emotional appeals on the movie for our audience, that we know who our audience is, age and gender and that type of thing. And so I take into account all of that before we do the outline. The idea being that when you do the outline, you are naturally outlining a bestseller rather than a book that's just going to sit on the shelves and rot.
Right, because you're really understanding your audience.
That's right.
That's so great. Well, thank you so much for sharing these tips, Dave. And where can they learn more about all of the things that you teach in your seminars?
Okay, so the place to do that is to go to www.mystorydoctor.com.
Oh, that's right. Okay, well, thank you so much.
Okay.
And thank you guys for joining us on the book break. We'll see you next time.
Okay, thank you.